Buenas tardes a todos y todas. Estamos por comenzado este taller que vamos a estar presentando durante la tarde de hoy. Mi nombre es Hilbertz Núñez Sepúlveda, la directora de la coalición Restauración de Ecosistemas de Santurce. Vamos a estar presentando en vivo a través de la plataforma de Zoom y a través de facebook.com/CRESPR, que es nuestra página en las redes sociales. Ahí van a poder encontrar este video luego de terminado, también para compartirlo con personas que no se hayan podido conectar al momento. Voy a estar compartiéndoles un video que fue preparado con visuales que se estuvieron recopilando durante enero 2023 en la isla caribeña de San Barths. Vamos a estar ofreciendo un poco de información sobre esta experiencia ¿verdad? Que tuvimos en la tecnología, visitando 3 proyectos. Así que les voy a estar compartiendo el mismo. Pueden también conseguir el video a través de YouTube en nuestro canal CRES Borikén, en el área de esta, ¿verdad? De este media, que es YouTube, la biblioteca de CRES. Por favor, me confirman que están escuchando, que pueden ver la imagen. Como les mencioné, pueden encontrar el video en nuestro canal de YouTube. Muy importante, ¿verdad? Agradecer la Semana de los Arrecifes de Coral, la colaboración con las distintas entidades que han sido parte, ¿verdad?, de esta presentación, a Global Coral Reef Alliance, a también Iceland Nature Experiences en St. Barths, y también queremos agradecer al programa de Arrecifes de Coral del Departamento de Recursos Naturales y Ambientales de Puerto Rico, quienes han estado coordinando estos esfuerzos. Voy ahora a pasar con Juan Murcia. Les voy a estar pasando la presentación que va a estar haciendo. Y le voy a estar compartiendo en unos minutos. Juan Murcia ha sido el biólogo marino de CRES desde el 2014, quien ha estado documentando y llevando las iniciativas de la protección y documentación de los arrecifes de coral en el área de Santurce, que incluye Punta Las Marías, el área de San Juan, el área de el condado y también hacia las playas de Isla Verde. Así que le voy a dejar, ¿verdad?, con Juan Murcia, biólogo marino.
Hola, saludos, buenas noches a todas y a todos. Gracias por esta semana tan diversa y tan dinámica y con tanta información que nos ha brindado. Para nosotros es un honor participar un año más en esta semana de los arrecifes de coral. Yo les voy a estar básicamente hablando sobre la tecnología de acreción mineral. La tecnología conocida como BioRock, y pues nuestra propuesta para el área en la que trabajamos. Aquí pueden ver un poco del contenido que vamos a estar trabajando. Vamos a estar discutiendo estos puntos y pues espero que sea una buena alimentación, retroalimentación y nada. Aquí un poco de trasfondo sobre nuestra organización. La organización fue fundada en el 2014. Nos enfocamos en generar una estructura holística basándonos en la conservación, restauración de los ecosistemas santurcinos aún presentes. Los arrecifes de coral han sido nuestros ecosistemas pioneros y ha sido nuestro impulso, ¿no?, para hacer algún tipo de impacto en nuestro alrededor. Los proyectos entre los que vamos a estar hablando en el día de hoy se ubican a unas 140 millas al este de Puerto Rico. Este proyecto lo visitamos primero porque es el más cercano a la isla y segundo porque básicamente tiene las mismas condiciones oceánicas a las que nosotros nos enfrentamos en la plataforma del este del Caribe. Se encuentra en la isla de San Bartolomé o San Barths, como se conoce en inglés. Es una pequeña isla de colonia francesa. Básicamente es una isla de 24 kilómetros cuadrados. Es un poco más grande un poco más pequeña que Culebra, que la isla de Culebra. Pues básicamente el proyecto se ha desarrollado con la integración gubernamental, turística y social, donde han desarrollado estos 3 proyectos de BioRock. En San Bartolomé tiene una población estimada de 10.000 personas en la época de turismo, que son como 2 picos al año, especialmente en diciembre. La población se duplica y puede ser hasta quizás mayor. Fuimos acompañados a los proyectos por la organización Island Nature Sandbar Experiences, que es básicamente la organización que administra y maneja, monitorea las estructuras BioRock. Aquí pueden ver la bahía, una de las bahías que está en la costa norte. Esta es, digamos así, como el centro turístico que tiene la isla. Aquí, además de tener el área del aeropuerto, tiene básicamente una laguna que recolecta toda la escorrentía de todo este barrio que, como les dije, es uno de los barrios más grandes que tiene la isla, y se depositan o terminan en el lago Etang. Esto es bien importante porque este lago ha impactado toda esta bahía, y aquí tenemos 2 proyectos. El que dice primer BioRock, pues el nombre se lo atribuimos a que fue el primer proyecto que se hizo en la isla. Y el otro sería el de Eden's Rock, que es un proyecto que se hizo, fue el segundo proyecto que se realizó. Perdón, el tercer proyecto que se realizó en la isla. Este proyecto fue básicamente híbrido entre la corporación del hotel y el gobierno y la organización que lo administra. Pues sí. El otro proyecto está un poco más al este de esta bahía. Se encuentra en el área de Punta Milú. Este es un proyecto que pues tomó un poco más de, de esfuerzo y de materiales, porque es el más grande que tiene la isla, y no solamente eso, que es el más lejos, el que está de la orilla. Aquí una breve descripción del primer arrecife que se construyó. Fue construido en el 2016. El trasplante de corales de la primera unidad que se hizo fue en el 2017. En el 2018 se añadió otra estructura adicional en este arrecife. Lo bien interesante de este arrecife es que se encuentra en una profundidad bien baja. Lo más profundo es 5 pies de profundidad. Es el más viejo. Es el arrecife que ha soportado gran diversidad de huracanes, entre ellos Irma y las grandes marejadas del 2018. El arrecife tiene una gran diversidad de corales, pero lo más importante es que los corales están creciendo en un estado completamente natural, y además de eso, que su fragmentación por la alta energía que reciben ha poblado los alrededores de la estructura, haciendo un beneficio no solamente directo al área donde está la estructura, sino ampliando al paso del tiempo el beneficio. Esta es la segunda estructura, la ampliación de la segunda estructura. Ahí pueden ver la estructura en la parte de abajo. Se puede ver la estructura del ánodo. El cátodo también El ánodo, perdón, viene siendo la parte de abajo en la imagen. Ese es el ánodo, y el cátodo viene siendo la estructura, que básicamente aquí ellos alternaban las estructuras que recibían la electrólisis, dado a que el equipo que tenían pues no soportaba el voltaje para las dos. A la misma vez, cubrieron el cable que sale desde la casa de esta persona que es una doctora francesa que pues, básicamente financió completamente el proyecto. Por eso fue el primer proyecto en la isla en el 2016. Estos cables, al ser protegidos, no tienen que ser impactados directamente por la energía, y esto hace de que el proyecto siga corriendo constantemente, que es uno de los grandes retos. El proyecto del arrecife de Hilbertz Rock, que fue básicamente el último arrecife en ser construido, es bien curioso porque es el que para nosotros fue el de mayor retos que tiene para el manejo, dado a que está en la zona más turística de la isla, al lado oeste de este hotel. Tiene la playa donde hacen unos parties y hacen fiestas, y al lado este tiene los negocios donde hacen lo mismo pero de día y desde por la mañana. Además de eso, al lado oeste, exactamente al lado del tómbolo, o un tómbolo ya conectado, básicamente esa es la estructura del hotel. eh, eh, Tiene unos tubos que están conectados a la bahía, que salen de E-Tank. Aquí pueden ver una estructura, la estructura que se trabajó en este espacio. Fue diseñada completamente a las características de los diseñadores, eh, que fue Rudy, fue el que diseñó este proyecto. Que básicamente es bien importante resaltar que en el 2020 esta estructura fue impactada por un ancla, dado a que está en un área donde usualmente los botes anclan, y pues es un arrecife bastante vulnerable dado a esas características, ¿no? Eh, a la misma vez, cuando visitamos, encontramos este tipo de arrecife natural alrededor, lo cual estaba completamente dominado por alga, y la calidad de agua se veía bastante turbia. En este espacio escasamente se vieron damiselas y pequeños peces que no son muy beneficiosos para el arrecife, pero las condiciones en las que se encontraba este arrecife eran básicamente como ven en la imagen. A diferencia de el arrecife BioRock, que tenían básicamente las estructuras para que pudiesen ser trasplantados los corales. Aquí pueden ver unos cuernos de alce, en los cuales se ven muy saludables creciendo en esta estructura. Sin embargo, cuando estábamos haciendo el recorrido, Tom Farargo se dio cuenta que la estructura tenía un fallo eléctrico porque un cable estaba roto. Por tanto, por eso es que se ve las algas creciendo sobre la estructura. Mientras la estructura está electrificada, las algas no se depositan en la estructura del arrecife. En esta área teníamos una gran diversidad de corales. Habían orbicelas, porites, que son los corales de dedos. Se ven en las esquinas de esta foto. Los corales cuerno de alce también estaban presentes. Cabe recalcar también que una vez se empiezan a llenar de algas, las primeras algas en llegar no son las filamentosas, sino son las algas calcáreas, las algas verdes filamentosas. No tocan la estructura en poco tiempo de perder la electrificación. Esto es beneficioso porque la deposición de arena por estas algas calcáreas es muy significativa, y pues no es perjudicial para el ecosistema a corto y mediano plazo. El último arrecife es el de mayor reto de diseño, donde se puede ver el gran esfuerzo que se hizo para construir este arrecife, donde se cubre una gran cantidad de espacio, aproximadamente unos 500 pies cuadrados. El financiamiento fue híbrido de este proyecto también. Se dio dado a las condiciones del Hotel San Christopher, que es el que básicamente provee las facilidades para electrificar la estructura. A la misma vez, fue el que puso los materiales para construirlo, mientras que el manejo es básicamente operado o realizado por INE. También este arrecife tuvo una característica de diseño donde los pescadores fueron involucrados y rellenaron las bases de la estructura con conchas de carrucho y pues eso fue una innovación que tuvo el proyecto. Pues se puede ver también el alto volumen de peces y no solamente eso, esta estructura también tuvo un impacto dado al paso de los huracanes que se quedó sin electricidad por más de 4 meses. Y durante la visita, pues nos dimos cuenta que una de las estructuras también tenía un cable lacerado y no tenía voltaje. Aquí pueden ver más diseños de distintas áreas del arrecife. Los 3 complejos de estructuras son una detallada obra de arte y varillas, donde además se innovó rellenando las bases con estas conchas. La profundidad también aquí es mayor y por ende también el reto de diseño, ¿no? Aquí se puede ver también la diversidad de especies de corales, que esta era la más diversa. Esta tenía Madrasis miderastrea, que es el coral que se ve allí en la imagen. Y también cabe recalcar que en esta imagen donde se ve el ánodo, la base de la imagen, el ánodo se ve electrificado porque se ve limpio en la parte de adentro, pero tiene exceso de voltaje, el exceso de calcificación. Eso es básicamente un problema de voltaje, ese exceso de calcificación. Pero todo esto es básicamente un beneficio para el ecosistema. Son cosas que se pueden ir compensando con la interacción con la tecnología, y pues la tecnología ha tenido grandes innovaciones. Ahora bien, nuestra propuesta en la costa de San Juan son condiciones muy similares a las de San Bartolomé. Ambas están de frente al Océano Atlántico y tienen los cuerpos de lagunas costeras que son básicamente significativas para las áreas de arrecifes de coral. La sedimentación y el volumen de urbe es mucho mayor, por tanto el impacto de sedimentos es mucho mayor en este arrecife. Entonces, como propuesta, nosotros pretendemos presentar BioRock como alternativa a atender el sentido de urgencia que tenemos en la zona urbana de Santurce. En esta área se caracteriza básicamente por urbanizaciones o casas privadas frente al litoral costero, en el cual se puede ver amenazado o se ha visto amenazadas las estructuras de las casas. Por ende, esta solución nos puede proveer una mitigación o básicamente una atenuación del oleaje, donde no solamente beneficia al ecosistema, sino se hace lo que realmente buscamos hacer con los atributos ecológicos, que es el efecto de protección o el efecto de barrera. Este arrecife es altamente diverso, tiene un alto nivel de recuperación dado a su ubicación. Las corrientes oceánicas permiten un alto atributo de larvas de todo el este del Caribe. Por eso es necesario simplemente tener unas buenas condiciones para estos organismos marinos, ¿no? Consideramos que en Puerto Rico se puede adaptar una estructura electrificada con el fin de instalar la tecnología de acreción mineral BioRock en conjunto al manejo de la misma con el grupo de usos certificados de CRES, replicando las prácticas ecológicas de manejo de INE. La unión con los distintos propietarios o propietarias de propiedades frente a la playa es vital para que se mantenga a largo plazo la estructura en función, como demuestra el caso de San Bartolomé, donde la comunidad es quien mantiene funcionando las estructuras BioRock y también han financiado estos proyectos. Aquí podemos ver una línea de casas frente al mar, que es el área más crítica que ha perdido arena. Y nosotros exhortamos a que sean alianzas con estas personas las que financien el proyecto y las que realmente apliquen esta tecnología para que ellos sean los que realmente se beneficien, pero a largo plazo queremos es lograr mantener los sedimentos en este área de playa. Desde el 2019 más o menos llevamos trabajando una colaboración con el US Naval Academy, donde ellos vinieron en el 2020, 21, para hacer un estudio en donde tomaron un perfil de playa y lograron determinar ese espacio de mayor amenaza. Básicamente hicieron un proyecto de protección costera, evaluando los sedimentos que están en la playa. Lograron recolectar sedimentos de 4 lugares del área del arrecife. Se hizo un análisis de granulometría y también lograron tomar unos datos de las boyas, usando boyas de Caricús, y lograron establecer unos parámetros para hacer unos modelos en unos túneles del US Naval Academy. En los túneles emulan olas que promediaron de 2 a 7 pies con distintas alternativas de diseño, donde utilizaron la tecnología BioRock, utilizaron también, emularon hierbas marinas, que son grandes disipadoras de la energía de las olas, rompeolas y combinación de rompeolas y BioRock. En su experimento utilizaron distintos criterios también para analizar estas distintas barreras o alternativas de diseño, donde usaron el costo recurrente, el beneficio ambiental, el beneficio o la efectividad contra huracanes, la subida del nivel del mar, habilidad para reducir el transporte del litoral, promover el transporte en la costa y además anticipa un apoyo a la población. Estos criterios los utilizaron para analizar las alternativas y las de mayor índice fueron BioRock y la alternativa de la combinación con rompeolas y BioRock. Las escalas las hicieron en dimensiones de 1 a 10 y la profundidad básicamente la establecieron con el perfil de playa y de ahí sacaron el alto de las estructuras. Aquí pueden ver también los túneles que usaron, emulando también las estructuras BioRock y sus diferentes componentes. También cabe resaltar que en este estudio sacaron un contexto de cuánto debería ser la cantidad de estructuras y de qué tamaño, dado el largo de playa que querían impactar. BioRock salió con el mayor por ciento el mayor coeficiente de transmisión de sedimentos, que es básicamente el alto, la disipación del alto de la ola y cuánto absorbió la energía del oleaje. Entonces, nosotros proponemos básicamente esta estructura porque es la mejor emulación que tiene un arrecife artificial emulando un arrecife natural. Y esto es un beneficio tanto para las condiciones en las que se reciben las condiciones marítimas y las condiciones atmosféricas y también las condiciones sociales. Es la mejor opción que podemos tener para las costas de Santurce, y no solamente para Santurce. Esto puede ser un buen modelo para Loíza o Macao y todos los pueblos que realmente necesitan una mitigación de la absorción del oleaje. Nada, muchas gracias por la sintonía y estamos en la mejor discreción.
Vamos por aquí de nuevo. Les voy a pasar ahora y a presentarles al doctor Goreau Arango, quien va a estar presentando también sobre esta tecnología. Es la persona que ha estado, ¿verdad?, dirigiendo los esfuerzos del Global Coral Reef Alliance a través del mundo, quien también ha estado por muchos años implementando más de 700 proyectos alrededor del planeta, ¿verdad?, en estas áreas tropicales. Y queremos escuchar, ¿verdad?, sus recomendaciones para Puerto Rico. Ha estado también trabajando con CRES durante muchos años y queremos agradecerle su presencia en esta charla de la Semana de los Arrecifes de Coral, al igual que también sabemos que está presente David Farrell del US Naval Academy, quien fue que estuvo presentando los estudios que Juan les estuvo enseñando sobre Ocean Park y el área de Punta Las Marías. Al final vamos a estar teniendo una sesión de preguntas donde ustedes pueden, ¿verdad?, tanto escribirlas como hacerlas directamente para ser contestadas por cualquiera de los panelistas. Así que les dejo con el doctor Goreau y gracias, bienvenido. Welcome.
Hola. Necesito hablar en inglés, lo siento mucho. Soy caribeño también, de Jamaica, y con raíces panameños y cubanos, pero estoy acostumbrado hablando inglés. What I will try to do is to share my screen. Let me see if I can find the presentation that I want. 1 second. I think, Yvette, you have to give me permission.
Okay, let me know. I was thinking we have permission to do that. Try again.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, now let me just find the right. So let me just find the right file here. Hold on.
Si tienen preguntas que quieran ir escribiendo, las pueden ir escribiendo en el área del chat, en la parte inferior.
I think, hold on. I'm looking forward to my PowerPoint presentation. 1 second. Oh my. I see what happened. It closed it here. 1 second. Here's my presentation. Sorry about that. Can you see that now?
Yes, if you can put it bigger, it would be nice.
Okay, so let me go to, I don't know how to do that. Share full screen view slideshow. Is that better? Can you see the screen now?
Yes, I can see it, but it seems like the same.
Okay, so I will go from here. So what I want to talk about is that I know, I'm sorry again for talking in English, but the issue is about the coral reef disappearance and the urgency of the question of saving what little we have left of the coral reef from extinction. Now, I'm not going to show you anything about Puerto Rico in this talk, because all of you know more about Puerto Rico than I do. But my father took the first underwater photographs of Puerto Rico, I think in 1954. And Carlos Guenaga, who was the top coral reef scientist in Puerto Rico, was a very close friend of mine until he died, and we plan to work together on this. So let me just say very quickly, I'm going to tell you first the key points of what I'm going to say is first, there's the bad news, and that is that the situation is with coral reefs is they're the most vulnerable ecosystems of all to all forms of stress, that we passed the tipping point for bleaching already in the 1980s. Most of our coral reefs are dead or dying, and very few are going to survive the next big El Nino, which is about to happen. Our current coral reef policies in terms of climate change are a death sentence for reefs. Now, because coral reefs are the most vulnerable of all ecosystems to climate change, if you can save coral reefs, we'll save all the other ecosystems. But if you let coral reefs die, which is what we're doing now, many other ecosystems are going to follow. So that's the bad news. Now, the good news is that we have methods to reverse this, but only if we act very quickly. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what we call BioRock electrotherapy, or BE, which is a really remarkable technology for enhancing the healing and the growth of all marine ecosystems using safe, low levels of electricity. And I'll show a little bit about that later, but it's the only method that we know that protects coral reefs from bleaching from high temperatures, which is probably going to happen over most of the Caribbean this year. It's just beginning right now. The advantage of what this technology does is it enhances the healing and the growth of all marine ecosystems, coral reefs, but also others, mangroves, seagrasses, salt marshes, oyster reefs, mussel reefs, all of the others. And we get them to survive extreme conditions would normally kill them. For example, with coral reefs, we keep them alive through very severe bleaching events where everything around them dies and our corals keep growing. So we're able to grow back these ecosystems quickly. And when we do that, the beaches grow back that have washed away in many places, almost completely disappeared. We grow them back naturally very quickly. And what we're able to do is to grow reefs that protect the shoreline, that match the rate of sea level rise. They keep growing as sea level rises, so they don't fall behind sea level rise like any seawall made out of concrete or rocks will. Now, the other thing is that this technology enhances the fisheries and the whole ecosystems around them, and we were able to adapt them for sustainable mariculture to produce species that we want. And I'll show some examples. We can use this to grow islands in shallow waters and to make floating reefs. And there are huge possibilities. We can use it to increase the rate at which carbon is taken out of the atmosphere and stored in sediments in seagrasses and mangroves and salt marshes and preserves. So that enhances that preservation. And in addition, we can actually grow, as I'll show you just very briefly later on, we can grow building materials in the sea that actually remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, unlike the cements that we use now, Portland cement, which adds 1 ton of CO2 to the atmosphere for every ton of cement that we use. So this is a technology that in principle can provide the base for an integrated and sustainable ocean economy, and which we need to do on a very large scale worldwide, in Puerto Rico, all around the Caribbean, all around the tropics, and worldwide. And so, however, as I will show you, it's only a temporary solution because in the long term, we have to stabilize climate at safe levels. But until we can do that, it gives us some time to keep our reefs and our ecosystem services functioning until we can reduce climate to safe levels. And I'm afraid that, complicated measures may be needed to do that. So let me move on. People ask me in every talk that I give, why bother to save reefs? We know they're going to die anyway. Who cares? So what? That's a question I get in every talk. And very few people have really dived in the water and seen them. In Puerto Rico and any island in the Caribbean, it's only a few people who really know what's underwater. But if you look at coral reefs worldwide, they contain more than a quarter of all the different kinds of fish species in the ocean in less than 0.1% of the ocean. So this tiny little fraction. There are hundreds of times higher levels of diversity of fishes in coral reefs than the entire ocean. And that's the same about the biomass, the amount of living organisms, the same about the productivity. So, and the ecosystem services they provide, which include fisheries, protecting the shoreline from erosion, and providing sand for new sand for beaches. So the ecosystem services of coral reefs are incredibly valuable. They're more valuable than any other ecosystem on Earth. There's a study done by economists that looked at the deterioration of ecosystems worldwide, and they found that about 60% of all of the global deterioration of ecosystem services worldwide was caused by the deterioration of coral reefs. So 60% of all the economic value being lost in less than 0.1% of the ocean. You understand that the value of the coral reefs is hundreds or thousands of times greater than the rest of the ocean. They're just extremely productive. And we're losing them very quickly. And I'll come back to that a little later. But we're losing them quickly. And if we don't regenerate them, we're going to lose our beaches and our islands worldwide. It's estimated that about half of all the beaches worldwide are going to disappear in this century if sea level rise does not increase if wave energy does not increase, both of which are happening. So we're in a very serious situation. Every place that relies on beaches for tourism. We have to protect our beaches and grow them back. And the only way we can do that is by having healthy growing coral reefs in front of them, not dead and dying ones. So that's the key to basically tropical tourism economies, which are based on the beauty of a coral reef. Now, coral reefs are the most sensitive of all ecosystems in the world to high temperatures. I'll come back to that a little later. And I think you know this in Puerto Rico, but coral reefs need the cleanest waters of any ecosystem. And most of them have died a long, long time ago. In Puerto Rico, a lot of them died a long time ago when they cut down the coastal rainforest for sugarcane plantations, hundreds of years ago. No one remembers what most of the reefs in Puerto Rico were like. But worldwide, very few of the reefs we have are going to survive the next 10 years, or the next El Nino, which is just starting. So coral reefs are the most vulnerable coral ecosystem of all to climate change. And the question is, how do we protect it? To understand coral reefs, you have to look very closely at them. Now, my grandfather was the inventor of macro photography, close-up photography. He was the first person to show how to make the lenses to show things close up. And he was also the pioneer of photographing coral reefs. And this is the first underwater close-up coral photograph showing the beauty of the reefs. This is from 1948 in the Bahamas, in Bimini. So my grandfather and my father began in the 1940s photographing coral reefs and looking at the changes in the health of the ecosystem. They're the first people to do that. And they began that in 1947 in Bikini Atoll in the Pacific. And on the left is my father measuring the radioactivity of fish from the bomb tests. And that killed him when he was 45 years old of cancer. He died very young because of that. So we were diving on coral reefs, before they had buoyancy control vests. And so I'm going to show you pictures now of the first coral reef in the world to be studied by diving. And this is not in Puerto Rico. This is in Jamaica, which is the island that I come from, which is the island most like Puerto Rico of any island in the world. Jamaica and Puerto Rico are the most similar. I'll come back to the differences with them a little later. But we began diving. This is the first reef in the world in Ocho Rios in Jamaica that was described by diving. And I saw it happen. My father dived and he looked at the zonation up and down. And this is the reef at this point came right up to the shore. And this photograph in 1954 shows my father and my
sorry,
brother.
Tom, we just are seeing the same presentation, like the same, or like page 9 of figure 7.
I'm sorry?
I don't know. We are seeing page 9 of figure 7. You are showing this, or
Okay.
you're showing another presentation?
I'm not sure if you see a picture. Not sure. Yes. Maybe you don't see. Do you see a picture of people in the water?
We see one diver in the top and coral reef in the
Yes,
the bottom.
that's right. Okay. This is the first reef in the world to be studied by diving. And it had been destroyed by a hurricane 3 years before. This hurricane took the roof off of our house in Jamaica, and all the corals that were branching were broken and flattened on their sides. And what's also important about this photograph, it was taken by my grandfather, and he was standing on top of the cliff about 20 feet above sea level. And that cliff was all made up of dead coral fossils that were from the last time in global history when global temperatures were 1 to 2 degrees warmer than they are today. At that point, sea level was about 24 feet or 8 meters higher than it is today. So we know from those pictures, this picture was taken with a telephoto lens, and this was, the point is that it shows that the sensitivity of global sea level and temperature to CO2 is much more sensitive than the climate change predictions say. This shows it very clearly if you take a look at it. So this reef was broken and was just beginning to recover from being broken. And these pictures are the first pictures of coral reefs underwater from Ocho-Rios. These are now 1957. This is 6 years after this reef was flattened by breaking. So I'm just going to show you, you begin to see now that the corals that were broken in those days kept growing. They kept growing. The broken corals were completely white. They weren't overgrown with algae, and they kept growing upward right up to the sea level. You couldn't swim over the top of it at this point. This is back in the 1950s. And Puerto Rico was very similar to Jamaica at that point. But these are the oldest pictures showing shallow reefs anywhere in the world. Now, when we dive on the reefs in Jamaica, this is what they look like. They're dead. They're covered with algae. We had no algae in the old days when I was a boy. We have dead reefs. Mostly algae are all over them. And very occasionally, if we're lucky, we will find a live coral like that. Well, again, and you see the same in Puerto Rico, and a few places you'll see live coral, but most of what you see is completely dead. And this is
we can see the presentation. We are just seeing the same image.
You're not
Have
seeing
you changed it?
You're not seeing the images?
Just one, just the same.
Uh-oh, I don't know why. Hold on. Thomas, you have an idea why?
What's going on?
I'm trying to show the images here of the PowerPoint.
No, they're seeing the same images, but not the ones of what you're talking about.
Well, that's what I don't understand.
Well,
Yeah, maybe when you share the file.
Let me stop share. Sorry about that. Let me go back to the PowerPoint. I don't know why that's happening. I beg pardon. Were you seeing any of these pictures? Can you see the pictures now?
No.
Oh,
You can share the screen and put the pin on this presentation. I think it was on another thesis something.
Oh dear. Okay, well that's very disappointing. Okay. It should be in Zoom and screen share. Share screen. Okay. Now the problem is finding the right screen here. That's my issue here. Is I want to be in the PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Now, do you see an image now?
Yes.
Okay. I am very sorry. That's the problem. I was in the wrong file. Okay.
so, but that's from the beginning, right?
Yes. Okay. So this photograph is from 1954, and this is the first coral reef in the world to be studied by diving. First in the world. At that point, this is me and my father and my brother swimming in that reef in 1954. At that point, the corals grew right up to the shore of the land. But 3 years before that, a hurricane had broken all of the branching corals and put them on their side. It took the roof off our house. And we were studying this reef at this point that it was just recovering from a catastrophic hurricane. The next pictures show it 3 years later. Can you see these now? Are these showing up? These
yes.
Okay. And so yeah, these pictures show me when I was 6 years old, diving on the reefs in Jamaica and looking at a reef. And you can see the dead coral that was broken was white. There was no algae on it and just kept on growing. It kept growing back up to the sea level once again. And that after 6 years after this devastating hurricane, the corals had grown right up to the surface and you couldn't swim over them. So this is how it was back then. It was like that in Puerto Rico now. And now in Jamaica, this is what we see. We see algae all over the reef. We see dead coral, smashed coral over the bottom. It's smothered with algae. Every now and then we see a live coral like this, which makes us very happy. And what we're doing now is we're saving the broken corals we can find. And this is In Jamaica, that we had 2 years ago, Hurricane Eta and Iota, which are Category 5 hurricanes that's formed after the hurricane season was over. And we rescued broken corals, and these are corals we're growing using BioRock technology, which is what we're going to talk about a little later. So I'm saying the issues are very serious. Now, compared to Jamaica, Puerto Rico has more stress because Puerto Rico has more people in less area. It's a smaller island and has bigger population. And in addition, the reefs around Jamaica and around Puerto Rico mostly grow around the limestone rocks, the Roca de Caliza. And Jamaica's almost all limestone. Puerto Rico's much less so. So in Puerto Rico, in the areas that don't have limestone, there's much more mud and erosion in the waters, and so the reefs are confined to much smaller areas than they are in Jamaica. So Puerto Rico reefs are more stressed than they are in Jamaica. But in Jamaica, we've lost almost all of our reefs. Now, we've known all along that reef corals are the most sensitive of all organisms to stress. And back in 1979, we published the first review of coral reef ecology, and we said they were the most sensitive ecosystems of all. And I don't need to go into this. I'll talk about this with biodiversity. But the key thing is that in the 1980s, we suddenly began seeing mass coral reef bleaching in the Caribbean and worldwide that we'd never seen before. It was due to an increase in temperature that was so small that we couldn't believe it, like a tenth of a degree above the kinds of temperatures that we were used to seeing in the summers in the Caribbean, started to cause mass coral bleaching that we had never seen before. And we've been diving and looking for this kind of stress. We'd not seen it. The coral reefs are the most sensitive ecosystem of all to global warming. And the thing that is frightening is that it is the most pristine reefs, the most undisturbed reefs, are the worst affected, because in the reefs that are affected by humans, which is all the reefs near human beings, we've already lost most of the corals, and only have the most stress-adapted corals, that weeds, so to speak, that have survived. So there's no place for corals to hide from global warming, and it's the reefs that have never been touched before that are the most vulnerable. Now, because coral reefs are the most vulnerable ecosystem, if we save coral reefs from dying, disappearing because of global warming, we're going to save all the other ecosystems. But if we let them go, we're going to lose many more. And that's what we're trying to prevent. So they're already past their tipping point. They can't take any more, and the next El Nino is going to be a death sentence in many places. Because of the failure of the political system to deal with global climate change, we're headed for overshoot. We're headed for levels of temperature change that we have never seen before in human history, which are going to be lethal to most coral reefs. So it's a devastating situation for them, because the international agreements on climate change don't save coral reefs. They don't protect the most climate sensitive ecosystems, and they don't require serious accounting for greenhouse gases or solutions that might work. So what I'm saying is that countries like Puerto Rico that depend on their coral reefs are the most vulnerable of all to climate change. And they've been let down throughout the entire climate change negotiations, because the countries that produce fossil fuels have blocked every effort to stabilize CO2 at safe levels. So the question is, what can we do to save the reefs, given that people seem to be determined to pump every amount of fossil fuels into the atmosphere that they can? Now we have some solutions. Governments have denied the problem. All of the governments have denied the problem because they're so involved in maintaining business as usual with their fossil fuel economy. So they denied that temperatures were the cause of bleaching. They denied reefs were dying. They hired people to say that nothing was happening, and they just wasted 35 years in which something could have been done. So now it's a really critical situation. Now we're headed for overshoot, in the sense that we're going to go to levels that are lethal for coral reef ecosystems. So how can we protect them? Now, what I will say is that in the past, Coral reefs have gone extinct many times. Every time temperatures have gone out of control, coral reef ecosystems have died. And every time that that's happened in the past, it was due to a natural catastrophe. This time it's due to human beings. But every time it happened in the past, coral reefs went extinct for about 3 or 4 million years. And then after that, gradually corals re-evolved and managed to occupy reefs again and grow. So coral reefs will eventually survive, but the ecosystems themselves and the services that they provide are going to disappear. And that's what we're concerned about, even if some of the species survive, in marginal environments. Now, what we use to protect coral reefs is what Juan David showed you earlier on, this BioRock technology. He showed you pictures of projects we've been doing in St. Barths, San Bartolome in the Eastern Caribbean for several years. And those projects we put in the water before Hurricane Irma, Category 5 hurricane, which the waves of that hurricane broke right on top of those reefs when waters were only about 3 feet deep. The waves broke right on them. They may have been 30 feet high waves. We don't know because they destroyed every house and hotel on the other side of the beach behind that reef. But we had no damage to the corals or to the structure or to the cables that were powering that reef. So it was really, really very incredible. That reef survived that hurricane without any damage at all. Now we do that with a little trickle of electricity we call BioRock electrotherapy. And that people are very afraid of electricity in the water. They think of high voltage, high current, high frequency. It makes your hair stand up straight and then it kills you. Okay, but we're using extremely, completely safe, extremely low voltage, extremely low current, 0 frequency, like a small battery. And it's in the range that naturally heals all forms of life. And that's an amazing discovery that we made from looking at reefs that we were growing with electricity all around the world, first in Jamaica, but then all around the world. So it's a really remarkable technology that stimulates the growth and healing of all marine ecosystems through the safe levels of electricity, not the dangerous one. I'm going to show you some pictures of that, but it allows us to grow, increase the settlement, the growth, the survival, and the resistance from stress of all marine organisms that we have looked at. We keep coral reefs alive through bleaching events. And it's quite astonishing, but every marine organism we have looked at is enhanced by what we do. And also the biodiversity and the biomass increases to levels beyond what we'd seen. So we're able to keep with this, with the low level of electrical stimulation, we're able to keep ecosystems alive where they would die and grow them back where there's no natural recovery. I will show you some pictures of this coming up. The method we use was invented originally by an architect to grow building materials in the sea. He wanted to grow solid rock to make buildings. And then I asked him to come to Jamaica to work with me, to work with it on corals. And we worked with that for 20 years until he died. Let me show you some pictures. This is the material we grow. This is rock that is 2 to 3 times harder than concrete. Almost all these pieces were grown in 2 years on the Maldives Islands in the Indian Ocean. This is hard rock. So we build structures out of steel. And as you can see here, the steel has no rusting on it, completely protected from rusting. And then we grow rock, hard rock over it. And we can do this in any size or shape. So we can make reefs to protect shorelines and beaches from erosion anywhere using this method. We just have to do it slowly at about no more than 1 to 2 centimeters a year. So what we do is we make open frameworks that are similar to coral reefs. Coral reefs are open frameworks. The waves go through them and they feed off those waves. That's really important to coral reefs. They don't reflect the waves because that is what causes erosion. Completely different. This is a 4-year-old BioRock reef in Bali, Indonesia. And this is an example. Where we grew this, there was nothing beforehand. You can see there was sand There's a little bits of broken coral, but those no corals, no fish. This was after 4 years. We built a dome-like structure, a big dome here, and we transplanted a few pieces of coral that grew very fast, and other corals grew settled by themselves. And then the huge fish populations moved in because this was area was just barren of life before we began. At this site, we have about 150 different reefs. This is another 4-year-old reef, also in Bali, Indonesia. And these, I'm going to show a set of photographs that were all taken in one day at the same location by one photographer, Ewan Jai Im. So we have about 150 reefs at this site. Each one is a different size and shape. So these are only a very small proportion of them. And many of them are, well, you can see here what happens. This one here was designed by an artist. We call it the Goddess of the Sea. And you can see the corals growing all around it. But the Balinese people are incredible artists. And we have many sculptures that are based on that Balinese have designed. This is like a crab. And you see people's names here because these projects have been done with no funding at all. Tourists donate 15 euros and they get their name growing in limestone and their picture of a coral later on. That supports the project. We've had no outside funding at all. But the Balinese are incredible artists, so we have many projects based on Balinese art. You'll see that in a moment. In this area, we've grown 150 reefs of BioRock in an area that was barren in the sand in front. And then the whole area between the reefs we grew and the shore grew back like this naturally. All these corals that you see here, when we began, there was only 1% or so live coral cover here. Everything had died. This one in front here was a survivor, the rounded coral, but all the rest settled spontaneously because of the electrical stimulation. So we regenerated this entire reef. And then, in addition, not only did we regenerate that whole reef naturally, but the beach behind it, which had eroded, grew back naturally as well. And it changed from black sand to white sand. The black sand had been volcanic sand, and the white sand was the remnants of algae growing on our reef. So we were producing new sand as well as protecting it from erosion. This is an example of a beach that we grew back with BioRock reefs in Indonesia. When we began this beach, the shoreline was right at the edge of these buildings that you see here, and the tree in the center here had actually fallen into the ocean and was now the sand has grown back and has been buried back. So we moved the whole sand beach back over a huge area by growing reefs in front so we can regenerate eroded beaches. Let me show you a short 2-minute film of what we do, just to show you in Indonesia how we stimulate the growth of corals. This is, as I say, the Goddess of the Sea. It's a sculpture. We get huge populations of fishes there. There was no fishes before because there's no environment for them. But when we created habitat, the fishes just populations increased and moved right in. You can see the soft corals are overgrowing everything beautifully. Here, people are attaching new corals. They're taking naturally broken fragments that are small, irregular broken fragments that have been rescued that have fallen into the sediment. But what you'll see is, for the pictures ahead, they turn into perfectly rounded, symmetrical corals very quickly because they're growing so fast and are so remarkably healthy. And that attracts fishes and all forms of marine life that are, come by themselves. We don't bring them there. We just put a few corals on and we're able to generate the entire ecosystem. This is something that allows sustainable mariculture of whole ecosystems of the fish, of lobsters. We make lobster habitat. We can make habitat for any species we want. And then we get just incredible growth of these marine organisms without adding any kind of food because the ecosystem itself provides and regenerates that food. So these are just a few more examples, but as I say, these This is a film that was just taken in one day at one location, but it shows there was nothing here before we began. I mean, the corals were not there, the fish were not there, and this could be done in any coastal ecosystem, although in other places you'd be growing oysters or mussels or other species. But it works in any marine ecosystem. I'm going to show you that in a moment later. So we'd like to see something like this happen, obviously, in Puerto Rico and in in every reef area where the reefs are gone and where our beaches are washing away. Now, I want to show you some other aspects here of BioRock. Sorry, Thomas, could you turn the music off? Thomas?
The phone call.
Okay, yeah, okay. These are BioRock reefs in the Turks and Caicos Islands, which are near to Puerto Rico. And these photographs were taken just before and just after 2 Category 5 hurricanes, the 2 worst in their history, hit, which destroyed or damaged about 90% of all the buildings on the islands. And what you see is there was essentially no damage to them. What happened in the hurricane is the sand piled up under, the sand buried the lowest parts. The corals were not damaged, but solid reefs were destroyed. The solid blocks that you see that were in the middle, half of them were thrown completely out. This is in St. Barths. Well, you've seen the video and the pictures that Wanda Vid just showed, but this is an area where Category 5 hurricane waves were breaking in waters that are only about 1 meter deep or 3 feet deep, and there was no damage to it. So we're able to grow, if we're careful about the design, hurricane-resistant structures that regenerate the biodiversity and the coral growth and the shore protection and the beaches themselves behind. So that's what we're trying to do every place. This is a reef in Bali, Indonesia, that's 21 years old, and it has survived several serious bleaching events that killed most of the reefs in the surrounding areas. The BioRock method is the only method we know that keeps corals alive in severe bleaching events, and that's very important. A lot of people are breaking corals and fragmenting them and hanging them on fishing line and all the one thing or another. The point is, they won't survive when the temperatures get hot, when the mud is too high, when the water's polluted, or when diseases hit them. And that's where BioRock's completely different. Our corals are not only growing faster, but they survive conditions that would kill them otherwise. So this is the only method we know to save coral reefs from bleaching. That's why we call these BioRock coral arcs, and we want to have them in every coral reef country in the world to save our species from disappearing and to save the ecosystem services of our reefs in more than 100 coral reef countries, including Puerto Rico. So that's why we think this technology is so important. It's the only one that really works. This is an example in Bali, and this shows before and after. This is the same place, the same area, and 10 years apart. And these corals that you see on the right settled by themselves. We didn't put them there. They were attracted by the electrical field in the surrounding areas around the cables that we set. We had the corals on the sand in front of the dead reef, but the whole reef itself sprang back, and the beach grew back. The beach had washed away, and it grew back by itself. So this is another example. This is in the Maldives in the Indian Ocean. This is a BioRock reef we grew. This is after 16 years. This BioRock reef survived the bleaching in 1998 that killed 95 to 99% of the corals in the reefs around it. And it not only survived the bleaching because of the BioRock, it also grew back a severely eroded beach that had washed away. It grew that back in months. And this is that beach. When we began this project, this building that you see in the background was about to fall into the sea. And we had piles of sandbags in front of it trying to prevent it falling in, and they said there was no way they could save it. But when we grew a BioRock coral reef in front, the one that you just saw, the beach grew back that tall. So we're able to regenerate reefs by growing natural protection in front of them where all other methods fail. Another key point that's very important is we hear a lot of talk these days about blue carbon. Blue carbon is carbon stored by the ocean. When people talk about the blue economy, the money they'll make from the sea. But the fact is we're killing all of our coastal ecosystems worldwide where we have people. Let me mention about the difference between Jamaica and Puerto Rico. I say Puerto Rico has more people in a smaller area, and it has less limestone, so you have more sediment and mud. So your reefs in Puerto Rico are under more stress than in Jamaica. And Jamaica, I can tell we've lost almost all of them. So we're very late, but we can grow it back if we start doing it quickly enough. And that means by storing blue carbon, by regenerating coral reefs, by regenerating seagrasses, salt marshes, and mangroves. And those are the best place that we can store carbon and take CO2 out of the atmosphere and store it in the ground, because that's where you can store the most carbon at the lowest price in the smallest areas by growing mangroves and regenerating your fisheries. There's huge opportunities for islands like Puerto Rico to regenerate their coastal ecosystems, protect their beaches and their shorelines, and regenerate their fisheries at the same time, and store carbon. So we want to see that happen on a large scale in all tropical countries. So we're trying to work with people to do that. So BioRock technology really helps because we're able to grow these marine plants where they wouldn't grow otherwise. I'll show you just two examples. This is seagrass in the Mediterranean in Italy. And you can see on the upper left-hand figure, we're growing, this is about a quarter of a square meter, 1 foot on a side, powered by solar panels. We have 2 patches, and we're growing seagrass on top of bare rock. There's no sediment there. This is rock, not sediment, where seagrass can't grow. And we've got fish, we got oysters, we got mussels, we got crabs, we got shrimp, everything moving in very short order. The ones that we tried to grow without the electricity from the solar panels, they all died right away. So we're able to grow seagrass where nobody else can. This is salt marsh. This is in New York City, and this is a Superfund toxic waste, former toxic waste site in New York City, where everything had died, and we're using a solar panel to grow salt marsh grass. And we're able to grow that many times faster and higher, and we're able to make it grow seaward in places where all these ecosystems are washing away, just using solar panel electricity. So there are tremendous opportunities to regenerate our ecosystems, particularly with solar electricity, which is now going to be very cheap. It's down now to 1 cent a kilowatt hour. And this is another example of what our technology can do. Originally, it was invented by an architect to produce building materials from the sea. And what you see on one side, of the left-hand side of the screen, is a bit of rock that we grew for 2 years in the Maldives. And it's about 2 to 3 times harder than concrete. It's like marble. And a bag of material that I grew that's powder, I grew that very fast, so it's soft material. And so we can both grow hard building materials in the sea that are much cheaper than concrete, that can be grown in any coastal area of the world. And we can also produce a soft material, and then on the right is a brick that we made in Jamaica from that material. We use that to set it as a cement, and that actually absorbs CO2 for the atmosphere. So we're able to make building materials that are carbon negative, that take up CO2 from the atmosphere, that are harder and cheaper than concrete, and that could replace them entirely. Now, every ton of concrete we produce, Portland cement, produces a ton of CO2 in the atmosphere. And in addition, that's only The Portland cement is 20% of the concrete. There's 80% that's rocks that are dredged and transported and moved and, you know, out of rivers and all that. So we could get rid of all of that and produce building materials that are cheaper, harder, environmentally sustainable that any tropical country could be producing along their coastline. So that's a way, we think, of helping not only, if we can turn the building industry from being one of the world's largest sources of CO2 into a major sink, we can help with this technology restore ecosystems, but also to reverse climate change. Now, what we're doing with all of this is only a temporary solution, because in the long run, there are many possibilities. I'm not going to go into all of them here, obviously, of regenerating ecosystems, storing carbon, but BioRock electrotherapy basically provides an integrated solution for a blue economy for all coastal economies. It's not just coral reef areas. We can grow mussel reefs, oyster reefs. We grow any ecosystem. We greatly increase the productivity. There are a lot of solutions for making islands, for instance, artificial islands on shallow waters, floating islands. I'm not going to talk about them here, but the point is that there are huge possibilities, and these can be linked to producing building materials, producing green hydrogen using solar energy that would be much cheaper than what we're doing right now to destroy the environment. So this is a temporary solution until we can stabilize climate at safe levels. And I do want to say that I think that now, because governments have ignored the issue of climate change for so long, they've let it get out of control. I think we're headed for dangerous overshoot. And the truth is, we're going to lose most of the coral reefs in the world in the next few years in the El Nino that is just starting now. So if we don't have a lot of BioRock arcs, we're going to lose species. So we're trying to save the species as much as we can, and the ecosystem services that they provide, which are the most valuable. But in the long run, I'm afraid we're going to have to start doing serious efforts to reduce global temperature. This is not the point of this talk, because this talk is about generating coral reefs in Puerto Rico and the Caribbean and around the world. But I think we're going to have to, humanity is going to have to take very serious efforts to reduce the temperature increase directly until we can get the CO2 under control. I'm not going to talk more about that, but there are technologies in particular that could be done that would allow the development of ocean thermal energy, for instance, from the difference in temperature off the north coast of Puerto Rico being shallow and deep water, to produce sustainable CO2-free energy, at the same time pump hot water from the surface down. So there are possibilities there that have not been developed, but we are going to have to, I'm afraid, take, how can I say, serious efforts to control climate in the short run before natural mechanisms of restoring climate to safe levels are feasible. So it's a critical issue to save coral reefs. Coral reefs are on the front line, and we're doing all we can, but the key thing is that we need to be generating coral arcs and regenerating reefs and what they serve for everybody as quickly as we can. So I think I will stop there. Thank you very much, and there's more information on some of the these slides here. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Tom, I saw Thomas Sarkisian, who's part of the group, so thank you. And also Tom Goreau, thank you for this amazing presentation that has given us a little update of what's happening around the world with the projects and how the impacts that they receive, natural or anthropological, has been, mitigated by this infrastructure that you were, just proposing. Gracias a todas las personas que han estado con nosotros esta noche. Queremos abrir una sesión de preguntas, de dudas, comentarios. ¿Verdad? Si tienen algunos, si desean comentar, pueden utilizar la parte del chat o pueden alzar también sus manitas para ver de qué manera podemos, ¿verdad?, unirles a participar en esta presentación. También les Indicamos que pueden enviarnos cualquier otra duda, sugerencia o colaboración que les interese, ¿verdad?, realizar a través del correo electrónico de CRES, que se escribe CRES Puerto Rico, la palabra completa, CRES Puerto Rico, @gmail.com. Ahí pueden enviar, ¿verdad?, cualquier duda o pregunta que les interese compartir con nosotros. Tengo una pregunta de Rodolfo La Santa. Where I can read more about this topic.
Well, I think you have to look at our website, the Global Coral Reef Alliance website, www.globalcoral.org. Yes, so we've been doing this work for a long time. I will say that technology was invented in Jamaica, and we've done it in about 45 countries around the world, mostly small island countries in the Caribbean, the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, Southeast Asia. So we've been working every place we can because the needs are very great every place.
Thank you, Thomas. Also, Gabriel Rivera is asking, do government require permits to build these structures, or can this be built by communities?
Well, that depends where you are. And the thing is that in Puerto Rico, you have US laws, so that makes it very, very difficult to get permits. In general, in countries that have a lot of bureaucracy, it takes you many, many years if you get permits, and a great deal of money. It takes more money to get permits than the cost of the projects. And, you spend many years. In countries that don't have much bureaucracy, where the local people say, okay, go right ahead, there's no problem at all. So those are the places we like to work in.
Yes, also, but because you work directly with the communities.
I'm sorry?
Also, because you work directly with the communities in this project.
Well, we try to. We try to. The thing is that what we see is that the top-down management of marine resources all around the world has really failed very badly. And the thing that works in our view is where it's managed bottom up by the local community for their own long-term benefit. That's not possible in many places because it depends on the laws. So in most places, the local people have no rights whatever to decide, how to manage their resources. And then everybody takes everything they can, and it all disappears very quickly. So that's a big problem. So we try to work in play with groups that have the rights or the authority to manage their resources, that are concerned for the long run, because we're talking about the future of their children, their grandchildren. We're trying to regenerate their ecosystem for the long run. So if they're not committed, we're wasting our time. In places that are mainly for tourism, what we find is the people who are involved don't know how it used to be, and they won't be there a few years from now. There's a lot of turnover, and unless it's locally owned tourism, if it's owned by outsiders, there's no real concern about the long-term protection of the resources. So we try to find places that we're dealing with local people who remember how it used to be and want to get it back again.
Super. Also, another question was, wow, this is very cool. Does the BioRock success fully depend on the electric shock? Also, is this BioRock technology going to be introduced as an alternative to the United States Corps of Engineers proposal to build offshore breakwater structures in San Juan?
Well, I haven't seen the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers proposal. Actually, what I have here is this study here from the Junta de Planificación de Puerto Rico, and in which they rejected the earlier U.S. Army Corps of Engineers proposal. But now there's a new set about to be made. But fundamentally, what these proposals involve are concrete or rock breakwaters of different forms, because that's what they know how to do. And the thing is that those have never worked anywhere in the world. We have to be honest about that. Every coastal engineer knows they don't work, because what happens is they cause the waves to reflect, and the reflection of the wave washes away all the sand in front and then underneath, and then the structure falls down. So sooner or later, all of those kind of structures are guaranteed to fail. So what we do is very different. We do something that's like a reef, as it absorbs the waves going through it without reflecting the waves. And that causes the sand to build up instead of being washed away. Completely different physical principle. So our methods grow beaches where the traditional methods cause them to wash away. So it's very different. So we haven't seen their proposals yet, but we think that what we do is much cheaper and much more effective at the same time. So we hope they'll be open-minded. Now, I think, as I say, that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the first round of proposals were rejected by the government of Puerto Rico as being unsuitable and not helping to restore the natural ecosystems were needed to protect the shoreline. And Puerto Rico called for more of an emphasis on natural regeneration, so we say. So we believe that using BioRock methods is consistent with that. We can use that to make reefs that absorb waves, that grow beaches back, and we can regenerate seagrasses and where needed, mangroves as well with this technology. And we're very eager to help people in Puerto Rico do so. It's a place that's important to me. I say my mother and father dived in the reefs of La Paguera in 1954. This is, okay, a long, long time ago, and photographed the reefs. So, you know, we'd love to see these technologies being applied there as well.
Okay, there's also another question with Frankie Rivera Ruiz. Is available in any particular area in Puerto Rico which can be installed, the technology? Is the government engaged with this initiative?
Well, the thing is that we can build projects for any location. It's a matter of having, you know, the permission and the funding to do so. So that's a key issue. I mean, the thing is that, you know, the project I showed you in the Turks and Caicos Islands, we built by hand. We didn't have electricity. We couldn't weld them. We wired them together with little bits of wire. Okay, and it survived the hurricane, even though it was built, you know, it wasn't attached to the bottom. Now, but for in front of Condado and Santurce, you know we can get very huge waves there in hurricanes, and so we have to build something that's much stronger there, and so it's an engineering issue. It's not a problem. We have to design for the site, so I think that's important to do, and we can design in any place that needs to be protected. I think what we have to realize is that, you know, global warming is out of control. We're headed for overshoot. We're headed for sea level rise. You know, people don't understand how serious the issue is. I didn't really want to get into the alarmism too much, but we are. Let me give you the example. That first photograph I showed of me and my brother and my father swimming in 1954 was taken by my grandfather on top of a cliff 20 feet above the sea level. Okay, at that time the sea level, that was a fossil reef. All the corals were in position of growth. Okay, it grew at the last time the global temperatures were 1 or 2 degrees warmer than today. And at that time, sea level was 8 meters higher, 24 feet higher than it is today. There were crocodiles and hippopotamuses in London, England. So we see from that evidence very clear that climate is much more sensitive to CO2 than IPCC is telling us. Now, we're headed right now for conditions where the Arctic Ocean is going to be ice-free. And those are the conditions that happened 125,000 years ago. And what happened in Jamaica and happened in Puerto Rico too is these reefs grew up right up to sea level, about 8 meters higher than today's sea level. And then they died. They died, I think they bleached from high temperatures and died. And then they were smashed. You see all the corals in position of growth, and there's a layer of mud, lodo, no? Right? A thin layer of mud, and then above that, all the corals are broken, completely broken on their side, all bashed in. So there were huge hurricanes, super hurricanes or tsunamis, we don't know what. So, and that was the end of that period of time. It was warmer than today, okay? So the thing is, we're headed for that. We're headed for conditions now where we're going to have sea level that is 8 meters higher or more than today's level, or more, with unless we can control CO2 and get it down to safe levels. It's a very alarming situation. So we have the technology to adapt and protect ourselves in the intermediate period, but we really have to understand that global warming is completely out of control, because it's just in the economic interests of all the countries that produce fossil fuels. That's a disaster. The small island countries, the low-lying island countries, Puerto Rico's not a low country, but the atoll countries, and I've lived in every one of them, they're going to disappear. They're going to lose their countries completely. The reefs in many places are going to disappear unless we get this under control. No, it's a catastrophe about to happen, much worse than people realize, and we have the technology to reverse it. We're just not using it. That's what I want to end with. Thank you.
Okay, there's one more question. Gabriel Rivera is asking, can you go over really quick on how you provide the electricity for these structures?
Oh, sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, can you really go over really quick on how you provide the electricity for these structures?
Yes, no, thank you. That's a very good question. The thing is, that is a limitation of what we do, is that you do have to provide electrical current. Now, we can provide it converting from any method. I mean, I think that now solar energy is going to be so cheap, about 1 cent a kilowatt hour, it's going to be the cost, that is going to outweigh all of this. It's still not easy to do in the ocean because of waves. So, people are using it mainly in reservoirs or lakes and places that don't have big waves. So that is an issue. But we are right now, for example, designing projects for all the atoll countries to use large floating solar panel arrays and using floating BioRock reefs to protect them from waves and to grow fish and so forth and so on. So I think there are going to be a lot of possibilities in the future. But right now, the technology is there that we can solve many of these problems, but we're not using them right now as we should.
Thank you. There's no more questions right now, but we can still receive more questions. Podemos recibir más preguntas a través de la página de CRES. Pueden visitarnos www.crespr.org. Ahí pueden escribir preguntas también, o a través del Gmail. We want to thank you again, Tom Goreau, for this amazing presentation. And we will share it also on YouTube so people can have more access to it, okay? Anything you want to add?
Yes, well, okay, no, thank you very much. I just hope we can get projects started in Puerto Rico very soon, because as I say, the reefs there are disappearing like they are everywhere. And without really active effort to restore them, we're not going to get them back. And we have the methods to do that. And we have to really start investing in growing back corals with methods that work long term. And that's we think where BioRock is going to provide the best solution. So we're eager to work with everyone in Puerto Rico and everywhere around the Caribbean and worldwide to save what we have left.
Gracias a todas y todos que estuvieron conectados durante este tiempo. Les agradecemos su presencia y esperamos que sigan compartiendo este y los demás videos, también tanto los reportes que tenemos publicados en nuestro blog sobre esta tecnología, las experiencias que hemos tenido y nuestra propuesta, que verdad ya existe desde varios años, para crear esta tecnología, instalarla en los arrecifes de San Juan y también cualquier otro arrecife que pueda ser ¿verdad? Instalado. Estamos en ese momento de unir junto a demás agencias y presentarles también al cuerpo de ingenieros estas propuestas. Ya han sido presentadas anteriormente. El doctor Goreau estuvo presentando ponencia escrita durante los periodos de comentarios al cuerpo de ingenieros sobre el proyecto que fue presentado también nuevamente, que entiendo que ayer, hoy está siendo presentado por el cuerpo de ingenieros sobre las posibilidades. Así que sí, nos estamos moviendo hacia eso. La idea es poder también que las personas conozcan esta tecnología, conozcan cuáles son los retos y los impactos que vamos a tener y cómo esto puede ser una solución. Así que cualquier persona que desee unirse a esto, vamos a seguir educando sobre el tema. Este sábado 10 de junio vamos a estar en el Parque de los Molinos en Park Boulevard, en lo que es el paseo antes del último trolley. Vamos a estar haciendo snorkeling en Punta Las Marías, mostrando este arrecife de costa, ¿verdad? De la parte del frente de todas estas propiedades, y vamos a estar compartiendo más información sobre BioRock Technology o la tecnología de acreción mineral. Así que les esperamos este sábado a las 9 de la mañana en el Parque de los Molinos. Y gracias nuevamente a todas y todos. Que tengan buenas noches.